So this is when we present this training and this content and this briefing. There's a couple of questions that really persist among applicants. This is one of them. Does it actually make any difference at all? Why should we bother? What happens if we don't adhere to this mandate? Do you lose anything? So you're judged on those three. I hope you can see them. Those three criteria as an applicant, and I just want to show you from really from this year, Marie Curie initial training networks, some of the criticisms of proposals that were scientifically sound, that were evaluated above 85% and still failed, right? So just for argument's sake, we're going to say the science was good enough. Science could have had the money, but the other comments were like this. So you have a weakness of non-academic beneficiaries. In the impact section, you're too focused on academic activities and you don't have an advanced communication strategy relating partly to the question previously on social media. The data accessibility is unclear. If you're running your code and you haven't said what you're going to do with the output, out. Not out. Negative comments, right? And then the sum of the negative comments might result into out. In implementation, what do we come up with frequently? Again, there's not enough non-academic partners. You haven't said anything about data storage, data access. You don't have thinking or strategy. So these are real comments from last year. Take it as you wish. It's very difficult to say if you don't adhere to this mandate. That results in a 0.5 evaluation point. Difficult to say. That's not how it works. It depends on who are the three people evaluating your work. Do they know about this? Do they care? They will also, their decision process will be moderated by a EC project officer. In the past, it was done that way. In the future, it might evolve. So how aware is that person of this mandate, or how much do they care about this? So all of these uncertainties pile up and really put a serious question on whether you want to take the risk, right? Especially when we're giving you the copy-paste solution. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just pick the minimum that you should do to go through the mandate hurdle and make sure that your science is evaluated based on science and you win or lose based on that rather than other small issues. To get even more to the point, this is the other way of the coin. This is a direct copy of a evaluation report of one particular project, again from last year. This time I'm showing you what the strengths are. What do they like? So if you can't read this, the project foresees extensive dissemination of data to the scientific community, open access articles, open databases, that is convincingly described. The proposed outreach activities to a large audience are well described. So partly now you see how communication starts to fit in with open science. You also see that you don't want to mention one particular tool like social media in isolation, but you want to integrate it into everything else that you do. It helps to consider outreach to the scientific community and outreach to the world as a whole. Consider them as part of a spectrum rather than segments. And if you can loop that whole thinking backwards towards training yourself how to communicate better what you do, that makes it stronger. So, just to end this segment, one slide on where is all this going. Gentleman earlier was saying impact factor is important. Yes, it is. That's how we get evaluated. Today, it's an imperfect but simple measure that functions with known limits. Now, there is a trend though to find other solutions, and in fact Horizon 2020 is investing into projects to find bibliometric measures, alternatives to the impact factor. So here you have a scientific project trying to fix the way we are evaluated, right? So if they're investing money into this, somebody will start calculating in the next 2 years, there will be an outcome and a result. Another 2 or 3 years afterwards, that might actually enter the mainstream, which means that in 5 years' time, you will be evaluated in a different way. But if you focus only on impact factor, you're at a disadvantage. So you need to pay attention. And what I'm about to show you here is really from the UK, but most countries have a similar system and thinking. What I'm showing you here is really the research evaluation framework. What you see on the left are percentages of weighing, what's important, how much, what is important. What they say when they evaluate a particular institution, what's important is the research output. So this is where the impact factor comes in, or its alternative. So it is important to publish articles in high visible impact journals, and that's how important that is at the moment. Then they put 15% on research environment. Let's ignore this for the moment. That's not dependent on us as individuals. That's really political level within your institute. Where you can make a difference is this, in the middle. So it says impact in the form of case studies which demonstrate distinctive social, economic, cultural impact outside of academia, right? We're not comfortable by default dealing with outside of academia, other than maybe explaining what we do. It's not obvious how to handle it. And the message to take home here is that this is how we evaluate it today. This is not going to be how we evaluate it in 2020 if the funders are looking and funding ways and method to replace the impact factor. They want, funders are saying that research impact is not the same as societal impact, right? Research impact is impact factor, societal impact is something else. If you publish papers into Nature, what did they do in society? Did they solve a problem? Did they produce innovations, services, products? Did they solve somebody else's headache? Can you prove it with a case study? That's societal impact, which is not what we're trained to do, and we don't do in a publish or perish reality as default. So in future, the message that we're getting is that this 20% will increase, and this might decrease or be replaced by another measure. So you need to somehow devise strategies in your career plan to get better at this. And you already have to do it at application level if you care about Horizon 2020. There's no going away from it. But the message is that this will increase, and you really need to have a diverse way of dealing with it. So, any questions before we jump to the next question? I think we're doing okay on time. Yes.
You mentioned also one of the weaknesses on the project is the lack of non-academic partners.
Yes.
What is your opinion on data sharing in a project in which you have private partners who probably can have interest on making a profit out of this data?
Yes. Yes. So you have let's start top down. The top is that you have a mandate, obligation. Somebody says, the one giving the money says, you have the money on this condition. Fine. This is what the mandate is. Then you build a consortium or project with, like you say, academia and private partnerships, which is exactly what the funder wants. And at that point, the consortium will have a consortium agreement which will state that you generate the data in your lab, we'll use it in our market environment, and the consortium agreement will state what are the access agreements. And at some point, there may be a restriction so that only me and you can have access to that data for the duration of the project. We have to have a strategy at certain time after the project. What happens to that data? Is it going to be patented? Is it going to be totally, are we going to build, how are we going to exploit the intellectual property, right? So we need to have a strategy at consortium level. Now, although the mandate on the top is important, it shouldn't threaten the functioning of the project and exploiting intellectual property in a way that makes sense to the ultimate objective. And the ultimate objective for the funder is to bring your lab efforts to market. Therefore, it's you and SME that decide how the IPR is going to be exploited. Open science is not in direct conflict with IPR, even though it may seem so at the beginning. And the reason for it is very simple. Let's go back to your question and imagine you have a consortium of half scientists, half businesses. At some point, if you tell the scientists you can't publish, they leave the consortium. If you tell the businesses you cannot patent or exploit IPR in some way, they will leave the room. So they need to reach an agreement early on. What part of the effort will be channeled down the peer review channel, and what part of the effort will be patented, potentially for exploiting into markets. Once that decision is reached, you as a scientist are free to take all of the open science philosophies and apply them to that part of the project that was intellectual and just increasing knowledge on a problem. And likewise, the business part of the room will take open innovation principles, not just patents, but all sorts of IPR tools, and they will apply that to that part of the project. And the consortium agreement makes clear for everybody who does what when. Right? So there isn't necessarily, it's not easy, it's not obvious, you need to reach a synergy, but they're not necessarily in conflict. Okay, so this is a question that also comes up. It's a criticism, and the criticism goes like this: open science is all fine, but it's just a hippie argument for giving the public access to research they don't understand or care about, right? So why are you saying that it will actually boost economic growth? What is that nonsense all about? How does making EGU science open to the guy on the street create jobs, right? And in a way they're right. There is no body of peer-reviewed publications that put a finger on it and it's unarguable. But that doesn't mean that you should wait until that is published and accepted, because by then it's no longer innovative. You need to be ahead of the curve, especially when you're applying for Horizon 2020. And the reason for that is that first, the funder cares for it, so you should too, at least on paper. And the second reason is that the Horizon 2020 budget is going up a lot. And they don't want to see the projects increasing in terms of number of participants. That leads to a lot of competition. We're already seeing this on last year. For example, projects that in my field we were used to compete with maybe another 10 maxi. Now we're competing with 37 other consortia. So that's a lot of competition, and sometimes what you say on paper makes more differences that amount to being funded or not. Now, what arguments can you use, what references can you use to pay lip service to this particular